Starting video.
Yeah. And we are going live in Param Vijayate Sri Krishna Sankirtanam, total world victory of Hare Krishna. My name is Sitapati Das, and this is the first episode of Vaishnava Perspectives on the Modern World. And today I'm joined live in the studio here by my wife, Danna, and we're joined remotely by some great guests we have this week. We have Gaura, disciple of Srila Prabhupada, joining us from Canada. Welcome, Prabhu. We have Jivan Mukta Prabhu also joining from Canada, and we'll do some larger introductions in a moment. I just want to acknowledge the personalities who are present. And we have Muchukunda Das joining us from Whangarei, the Northland of New Zealand, and we are broadcasting from Vishnu Prema Pali, Vishnu's Village of Love in Taranaki in the west coast of the North Island of New Zealand. Thank you for joining us today, to our esteemed guests, and also to everyone who is watching either live on Facebook right now or one of the millions of people watching this in the archives on the internet, many of them not even born yet. Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna.
Perhaps we could do a round of quick self-introductions to give people a sense of who they're listening to. Could we begin with you, Gaura Prabhu?
Yes, I met Srila Prabhupada in Chicago, July 4th weekend, 1975. I came from my hometown of Winnipeg. 6 months later, I moved into the Chicago temple, assisted Tripurari Swami's airport party for 1 year, did a lot of traveling Sankirtan throughout America. Then I was asked if I'd like to help in Ottawa. So I served there for 7 years, became the temple president in Montreal Temple, served for some time in Toronto. Then I traveled with 5 different sannyasis all around America. Spent some time doing Bhakti Shastri, Bhakti Vaibhava in India. And now I'm back in the village of Erin, Ontario, about 1.5 hours north of the Toronto Temple. And I've devoted the last 2 years of my life trying to educate people and make them aware of all the lies and propaganda that's been put out on the internet, which has been a threat to our Vaishnava communities worldwide.
Have you ever, Prabhu? Yeah. You're probably one of the leading personalities in that conversation, one of the loudest voices for sure. And that's how I first encountered you, was your podcast, The Global Scam and Krishna's Plan. It's like literally the Ishopanishad, knowledge and nescience side by side, right? Distinguishing and understanding both. Thank you for your service.
And Pradyumna Prabhu was a great help to get all of that up online as well. He created different sites, Rumble, etc. So he was a great help with that.
And you're also an amazing connector, Prabhu, because you've actually brought all of us together and many others besides. And you. The other thing that I want to acknowledge is the Srila Prabhupada's disciples group that you created with much effort over time, bringing together Srila Prabhupada's disciples who are spread across the planet into one place.
930 of them.
Wow.
Epic.
Yeah. Thank you very much for your encouragement.
Thank you, Prabhu. And Jivan Mukta, Prabhu.
Hare Krishna Prabhu. Well, I joined the Toronto Temple in December of 1979. A few weeks after I joined, I was out on Sankirtan with Bhakti Marg Brahmachari at the time. He's Bhakti Marg Swami now. And I never looked back. I was always on the road, with different devotees, and traveled east coast of Canada a lot, and Ontario, Northern Ontario. I got married in 1984 to Sita Devidasi. We've had 7 children, 5 daughters, 2 sons. when I left the temple, like many of us, I was totally broke, didn't have, any money, and was able to somehow build up a pretty good business. And now, my kids are all grown. My youngest is 18. I've got 4 grandkids. And, I wasn't directly involved in, well, actually, for one stint there, I was a temple president in Toronto when there was some disruption, and I kind of filled in as a temple president there for a little while. But aside from that, my devotional service consisted of reading, chanting, interacting with devotees from home, and kind of really getting, seriously committing myself to Srila Prabhupada's movement, but not directly engaging with temple management so much, and definitely not with GBCs and so on. I'm very good friends with Bhakti Mark Swami, who is the GBC here in Toronto, in Canada, and although we have our differences, I still see him as a really as a good friend, and try to maintain good relationships with the devotees. And right now, I'm at the stage where the fruits of my labor have been very plentiful. Lord Krishna has been very merciful. I'm just kind of settling things with my children, and just trying to kind of retire from all of that, and really focus on the last phase of my life, which is, death is I could just feel its breath on my neck. So it's time to really get serious and focus, and prepare for that last breath that is going to that I'm going to have to take in a short while.
And Prabhu, you and Gaura were both present at the Canadian truckers' convoy protest in
yes, actually,
Ottawa.
what happened was, I was sitting here in my home one night, and I saw what was going on with these truckers, and I was so inspired by them. And I called Gaura up. I said, Prabhu, let's rent some big of these buses, like 50 passenger buses. I said, I will pay for as many of them as we can fill. Let's get these devotees out to Ottawa. We'll transport them. We'll keep the buses there if they have to stay in and keep warm. And unfortunately, as we extended the invitation, we found a tremendous reluctance amongst all these temple devotees to participate. It was shocking. In the end, out of this large community of devotees that we have here in the Toronto area, it was me, Gaura, and Prabhu, and a couple of devotees from Montreal. How many altogether, Gaura, Prabhu? Was it like a dozen or so?
At least a half a dozen devotees. Veda Vyas, Pradyumna, Bhakti Prairie, Bhakti Ryan, and maybe 3 or 4 others. Bhakti
It was incredibly disappointing, because I felt so driven to represent Krishna consciousness at this pivotal moment in time in Canada, and at the capital of our country, and we couldn't really get many more devotees than that. And it was frigid weather, minus 26 degrees. Before we left, I was told that we were invited to go on the main stage and give a quick speech, which the devotees kindly nominated me to give that speech, to write it and present it to the people there. Of course, we chanted the holy name on stage, and we chanted afterwards all around the grounds, all over the grounds. It was so inspiring. And it's something which I am so glad that Lord Krishna allowed us to participate. I regret, and I sympathize with the devotees that for whatever reason, decided not to participate.
They were instructed not to by local authorities.
Right. Well, whatever it was. As we know, there's a lot of politics going on there, many perspectives that, as far as we are concerned, are completely against our Siddhanta and our philosophy. But so be it. This is what happens. This is what happens when we get comfortable, when we start relying on others for our preaching. We become compromised. This is the problem that we find in all types of political organizations, is when you're compromised, you are very easily manipulated. And whether you're compromised because government is providing you maintenance, whether it's individuals providing you money or maintenance, usually it's money, whether you're compromised because of sinful activities, whether you're compromised because of behavior that you've engaged in, which if revealed would take you down. All of these things play a role in preventing you from expressing your genuine feelings about a situation. And this is, I think, what happened and what happens in ISKCON, and it's not unique. It happens everywhere. And
well, Prabhu, it sounds like a very sober, level-headed, standard analysis of human relationships, but fact checkers have determined that it's completely false and a conspiracy theory. So let's put the screen over the top of it. I'm being sarcastic and facetious there. What you say is completely obvious and true about human nature, and simply to have the conversation that you're having and apply that analysis to the institutions of today has become, unless you just completely throw that out the window and just think it's all rainbows and unicorns and, we are watching like Teletubbies, you've become like a dangerous extremist simply by stating that fact. Such has become the nature of the discourse today.
Yes. It's a fact. It's a fact, and it's unfortunate. But the one thing that we do have, which is our saving grace, for the time being anyway, is Srila Prabhupada's books, because we could say whatever we want. Everything that we say should be rooted and supported by something that Srila Prabhupada has presented in his books. Not just presented, but conclusively established in his books. Because he might say one thing here, one thing there, and it may seem as if there's a contradiction. But it doesn't take much effort to establish the conclusions of Srila Prabhupada based on the teachings, based on Shastras. So even our position regarding the government, regarding our support of the protest of this demonic system of government that we have, not only in Canada, but New Zealand, my God, it was shocking, even what you have right now with the Prime Minister there, Australia, everywhere around the world. I mean, these things are there in Srila Prabhupada's books. Our obligation to participate in protests and to speak out for the poor masses of humanity. It's there in Srila Prabhupada's books. It's not a concoction.
We didn't have that on the agenda for today, but looking at who is on this in this episode, it's an obvious subject for us to deal with, right? Mm-hmm. So let's go there. Let's by all means go there. Thank you, Jivan Mukta Prabhu. I have a request, Gaura Prabhu. Is it possible for you to maybe wipe the lens of your camera? Let's see if that sharpens up the picture a little bit, because you look a little bit blurry there. And then while you're doing that, let's move on to Muchukunda Prabhu. Could you give us a brief introduction of yourself and for both Jivan Mukta Prabhu and Gaura Prabhu, who are meeting you for the first time, although they may have heard of you, and also for the viewers?
Yeah, sure. So my name is Muchukunda Das. I am an aspiring Vaishnava in the tradition of Krishna, Gaudiya Vaishnavism. And I started practicing when I was 18. I moved into an ashram with Sitapati Prabhu and his good wife at the time, Parambhava. Vrajadam was there also, and Prem Yogi, who was kind of like the big brother I never had, and he kind of trained me up. He kind of made it like we were both going into the brahmachari ashram, and then he just kind of like ushered me into it, and then didn't join himself. So I became a brahmachari, and moved to New Zealand, um, and stayed, in the ashram there for some time. And then my guru, Devamrita Swami, said you'd probably be better suited in Melbourne. There's more opportunity for you to do creative service as a brahmachari. So I'm an artist by profession and by nature. And so, I moved to Melbourne, and, I was a monk, and I do service throughout the day. And then I started to get really kind of like, give an inch and they'll take a mile, right? So I had some creative license, as a monk, but I wanted more. I wanted to, my thing before becoming a devotee was graffiti, street art. And so I wanted to spread Krishna consciousness through street art. And so, I do my service throughout the day. And then I started going out and doing like pasting up big pictures of Lord Chaitanya and painting the holy names with whatever, resources I could get my hands on as a person with no income. And eventually, it was ascertained that, hey man, you're probably better off, living as a single person, outside the ashram. Usually monks don't come back at 11 p.m. after having, been spray painting, and it's not really part of the brahmachari ashram here. So that's what I did. I moved out, and cut to now I'm in New Zealand with my wife, and we have a child on the way. I just participated, last year in ProFest. And I realize now that I'm in a room with other people who did the same thing in Canada, which is incredible. I feel humbled to be in the presence of such like-minded devotees.
Thank you. A quick introduction for myself. My name is Sitapati Das. I bought the Bhagavad Gita during the Srila Prabhupada Centennial Marathon, 1996, December 31, very last day, from Bhaktisiddhanta Swami in Nelson, the centre of New Zealand, and joined shortly afterwards in 97. I've been an urban preacher for the last 20 odd years, running centres in New Zealand, in the centre of Lima in Peru, where I also ran with my wife at the time the BBT for 3 years. And then my first wife, Parambhava, who we were married for 24 years, she left her body during the pandemic in November of 21. And we had a son together, Prahlad Nrsimha, who is now 20 years old. And then I met my wife, Danna, at the protest in Wellington in the Parliament grounds during the occupation in the kirtan there. And then after the ProFest Freedom Village burned to the ground, I found myself in the second canto of Sitapati, no longer an inner-city urban preacher, but now living on 2 hectares of land with 4 cows in the post-apocalyptic agrarian Varnashram future preview on Earth. And so we now live here in Taranaki with our son Prahlad and our daughter Isabella, and 2 cats, 4 cows, 30 chickens. Yeah. So from inner city preacher to agrarian Varnashram Dharmi overnight.
Right.
So that's me.
Hare Krishna. My name is Danna, and I started associating with devotees since 2014. At that time, in 2013, my previous relationship ended, and I was looking for something more powerful, meaningful, purposeful, and Krishna got me, and then entered into Krishna consciousness, and my life has been around Krishna consciousness and how to evolve, reading the books, Bhakti Shastri studies. And obviously I was a single mom then. My duty was very important to me, because this is something that we do in South America, stick to your duties. And also what Srila Prabhupada was very clear about it, perform your duties nicely. And then I'm a nurse myself, and then the pandemic thing started, and I decided this is not on, and they mandated me, and I said, see you later. I haven't resigned it, they haven't kicked me out, so yeah, that's my story. And in 2020, I don't even remember the years now, or 2021, that's when I decided Srila Prabhupada wanted us to do Varnashram Ashram, to start with that, and also to cultivate the land. And I already have the project of doing that. I bought a land at that time, and I was living in Wellington with my girl, and I decided to move to Taranaki, and that's where things started, and continue going to the protests as much as I could. And I made Sitapati there. And here we are together, raising our two children, Perla and Isabella, and living a life that what Srila Prabhupada wanted us to live. And that's me.
Yeah, I didn't go to that protest. I went there to chant Hare Krishna because that's what we're commanded to do. And, you know, there's just, if one seeks, this was our verse yesterday in Bhagavad Gita, if one seeks to satisfy the senses of Govinda without desiring to satisfy one's own desires, then automatically all the desires of the living entity are fulfilled. So I didn't go there for that, and I got that. Yeah. Went there with nothing, came back with a wife, a new daughter, 4 cows, 2 hectares of land, and a lot of work to do. And a lot of learning of new skills, because as an inner city preacher, I haven't been like feeding chickens and building houses and all the kinds of things I'm doing now. Yeah.
Yeah. I think my inspiration to go to the protest wasn't because I wanted just to protest. I was in friendship with the Christian people, and they have a bit more of personality when it comes to the protest. So they were there for the people that were coerced and manipulated. And I said, because I look after clients myself, or I'm in patients, and they were coerced to that, it's like, it's not okay to do that. And because they're Christian, and I have a background of Christian, and I could not count with the Hare Krishnas, I have to be honest, in Wellington. There were people saying, we have to go and chant Hare Krishna. And in my disappointment, I went to the Christian group, and I talked to the pastors and his wife and what we're going to do, and so and so. And that's where things started. And then I get to hear some chanting, and I was kind of surprised. It's like, Hare Krishna's here. That's unheard of. Anyways, I just went down, and I saw devotees. I saw Sevaka, now that I know Cam, and yeah, some people that are kind of familiar to me. And I was kind of surprised to see Hare Krishnas there.
Yeah, and it just came out today. There's a new radio station called Reality Check Radio. Rodney Hyde was speaking there. I sent it on WhatsApp for you to listen to, and he's said, I went down to the Parliament protest, and you know, he said, I was there looking up at Parliament, and there were hardcore Greens voters there, hardcore Labour voters, hardcore Christians, Hare Krishnas, hardcore multinationalists, like every kind of person under the sun was all there. And I was just thinking that, maybe the Parliament has spent so many years dividing us, and these mandates and the coercion, everything that they're doing here has caused us to unite again. So we got to shout out there because, we're here and we're for the people and we bring the holy names. Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna.
So, Gaura Prabhu, would you like to, given your extremely powerful skill set in bringing together and coordinating groups of people, would you like to facilitate? I'd like to invite you. I invite you to please facilitate today's conversation and give us direction and structure.
Thank you very much. I just want to check in with you, all of you. Yesterday evening, we just had a spontaneous discussion, and then out of that came your inspiration to want to actually do something that we could share with others. So I'm wondering if you'd like me to go over some of the questions or thoughts that came out of last night's discussion, or would you like to go in another direction?
I think what we discussed yesterday, it's
let's keep building on what we created yesterday.
A lot of content there. Yeah.
So
First point I've made is that in the Global Scam Krishna's Plan video series that Pradyumna Prabhu and I did, we addressed, I guess there was about 15 installments. We addressed what some of the major problems are in the world, which includes the challenges faced by ISKCON, or the Hare Krishna Movement. And Danna, yesterday evening, she said, well, now it's time that we see what are the potential solutions and how to implement them. So one of the points that came up was that feminism has become an issue in ISKCON. Srila Prabhupada addressed it years ago. I went and I did a quick look for the definition of feminism, just so I can be clear. And it states in the dictionary that feminism is a range of socio-political movements and ideologies that aim to define and establish the political, economic, personal, and social equality of the sexes. Feminism holds the position that societies prioritize the male point of view and that women are treated unjustly in these societies. And then I'm making the point that there is concern amongst the Vaishnavas about the dichotomy and the negative influence of feminism in Vaishnava communities, whereas some view it as a positive influence on the basis of how actually we're not these bodies. So I raised the question, is it possible for a woman to be a feminist without being domineering and emasculating males? So and this leads to many other related points, but I just thought I'd start with that.
Mm-hmm.
Jivan Mukta, would you like to respond to that?
Yeah, feminism is, again, it's not a question of our opinion. We may have our opinion about it. When I joined the Hare Krishna movement, when I joined the temple in Toronto, the last thing on my mind was feminism or this or that ism. It was none of that was on my mind. The philosophy of the Bhagavad Gita was so powerful that, despite the fact that it didn't really sink in specific purports in the Bhagavad Gita where Prabhupada makes reference to women and their dependence upon men. But I joined because of the overall objective and presentation of reality by Srila Prabhupada and the Parampara. But the more I read Bhagavatam in particular, the more it became really apparent that the Vedic perspective of gender interaction is what we would call very, very traditional. Many of us whose families have come from Europe could relate to it. We've seen that in our own families, how the mothers how the mothers interacted with the husbands, how the women generally took a supportive role when it came into with the families. Although when necessary, I mean, they would take leadership roles if that was necessary. So this idea of feminism, though, is something which is very toxic, because it sets women against men. It makes women want to become like men. It takes women away from the home and places them in a public sphere. It takes women away from the authority and protection of the husband and puts them under the protection of a boss, an employer, and ultimately the government. That leads to the breakdown of the family, ultimately. And when we talk about, one of the things that we talked about last night was the abuse of children. Ultimately, it leads to the abuse of children. And it's something which is totally false. If I may, I compiled like a summary of Prabhupada's statements on this. If I could read it, would that be okay?
Gaura, you looked like you wanted to say something there.
Thank you very much. No, I just wanted to confirm what Jivan Mukta was saying, because it led to the second question. What impact does feminism have upon child protection in ISKCON?
Okay, yeah, that's a good segue there. But could I just, before you read that, Jivan Mukta Prabhu, I'd like to distinguish something here in support of what you're saying. And that is that earlier in the conversation you talked about demonic governments. And it's very easy for people to collapse that with a moralistic idea. We disagree with them, so therefore we demonize them, we call them demons. But it has a very specific meaning in Bhagavad Gita, the Asuras, those who say that God does not exist, the world is purely material, there's no spiritual element to it. This is defined in Bhagavad Gita as the Asuras. There are two types of entities, the Devas and the Asuras are the demons. And feminism is it's a specific instance of Asuric dialectic, which is that you take a real difference in the world and then you categorize it as a victim and a victimized, and then you make the whole thing about now the victimized should overthrow the victimizers, the oppressed should overthrow the oppressors, and then we will achieve heaven on earth. And the Asuras, the demonic, they use any class of difference they can find, whether it's between employers and the employed, the capitalist and the worker class, whether it's between women and men, whether it's between, if you have racial differences in your country, a colonizing racial history versus an indigenous racial history, they'll find any difference that exists in the world and put it inside this dialectic and set those two classes against each other. And that was what you pointed to there, Jivan Mukta Prabhu, that there are differences between men and women. They do exist. There are relationships between them as classes, if you will. And then there's this feminism which posits that the goal of it is to overthrow the differences and to set them against each other. And that is the materialistic or Asuric dialectic. So I just wanted to point that out.
I find that for myself, it's always easiest to refer to Srila Prabhupada's vision of the world. We're his disciples. So we want to see as much as possible through Prabhupada's lens, which is through his purports and everything that he's given us. I want to see the world as Prabhupada. I know it's a great, challenge, but Prabhupada gave us his purport, so he's allowing us to enter his realization of this world and Krishna and the spiritual world. So when it comes to these matters, for example, even when it comes to the issue of, for example, vegetarianism. Okay, we can talk in so many ways about the pros and cons of being vegetarian, about Krishna's diet. But ultimately, why are we vegetarian? Because that's what Krishna wants. So when we talk about feminism, it's the same thing. It's not a question of, what these sociologists or individuals think might be best, how it impacts people in different ways, how it's, an expression of justice, social justice, and so on. Now, we're not, as devotees, as Vaishnavas, we're not interested in that. What we're interested in is, what does Krishna say about this? What do the Vedas say about this? It's not a question of my opinion. It's not a question of whether I hate women or love women or this or that. It has nothing to do with that. What does Shastra say about this? Our lives, everything about our life is governed by Shastra. That's it. Everything. Now, most of us fall short, which is okay. It's not okay, but it's okay. It's understandable. Provided that we don't try to change that which we are aspiring for due to egotistical reasons. Because I cannot at this moment achieve a certain level of proper behavior doesn't mean that we negate the necessity of coming up to that standard. We know, for example, the 4 regulative principles. So I might have an attachment to smoking marijuana. I don't, but if I did, I'm not going to try to justify changing and try, pushing for a change of the rules and saying that they're unreasonable because of my shortcomings, of my weaknesses. Likewise, when it comes to these social issues, women and men may have certain preconceived notions of what society should look like. But as devotees, that's not what we're interested in. And that's not what Prabhupada's mission was. Prabhupada's mission was to establish the Vedic standard of social organization. And within that scope of Vedic social life, there is no room for feminist ideology. None. And that doesn't mean that women were kept as slaves or they were abused. They were revered, but they had very, very different roles and obligations.
I just wanted to throw one thing in there, Prabhu. You said, it's not about whether you love women or hate women. I just want to say that as a biological male, I love women. And then as a follower of Dharma in the Grhasta Ashram, I love one woman, my wife. And that is the way that religious principles can be imposed on my material identity in a way that can transform that what would otherwise simply be lust and exploitation into something that channels it and enables it to contribute to my own spiritual realization and creating a spiritualized society and protection for the people around me, my wife and our children, and providing that example to others in a way that creates the fabric of society.
Mm-hmm.
You had some points gathered there, Jivan Mukta, in regards to what we're discussing?
Yeah, this is Srila Prabhupada, because basically what I did was got all of Srila Prabhupada's quotes and references and just put it together in something that was like a cohesive presentation of his opinions on feminism. Here, Prabhupada, so I'll read it to you. I've got references for almost practically every sentence here.
One second, excuse me for interrupting. This is actually these are excerpts from a book that you've manuscript. What's the title of the book?
The title of the book is called Varnash. Hold on. It is called Vaishnavism and Social Responsibility.
Okay. How many pages is that?
Oh, it's about let's see, it's 80, 90 pages, and then I have about 600 footnotes.
Okay.
The equal rights movement is based on what Srila Prabhupada calls a demoniac, puffed up concept of womanly life. It is demoniac for a myriad of reasons, but there are two foundational heresies out of which all subsequent ideological and social aberrations develop. The first heresy aims at securing for women independence and freedom from male authority. The second heresy, which grows out of the first, assails the eternal and universal relevance of traditional Vedic cultural principles by methodically subjecting them to capricious interpretation and trivializing them as ultimately inapplicable to modern men and women. Prabhupada explains that human behavior is bound and guided by the laws of Manu. One of those laws, ubiquitous in the teachings of Srila Prabhupada, is that women should never be given freedom. Women, like children who are granted freedom, are essentially misled and as a result are abused. These restrictions are not designed to mistreat women and children. On the contrary, they are essential in order to protect them and society from widespread moral decay. The demons neglect these injunctions and provide women the same freedoms as men. This misrepresentation of femininity, conceived and propagated by modern educators, has caused widespread moral degeneration. Casualties of this moral decay are the cornerstone institutions of family and marriage. In fact, marriages, including those within ISKCON, are now practically an imagination, with family life being relegated and redefined into insignificance. So these are the statements, principles that Srila Prabhupada has stated. Srila Prabhupada only speaks according to Shastra, unlike some of his so-called disciples these days, who are causing so much disturbance and confusion. Prabhupada is not, his opinions are not affected by Victorian, early 20th century India. Prabhupada is not a product of that social milieu. Prabhupada is a Vaikuntha man. Prabhupada came directly to us from the spiritual world. So when Prabhupada speaks, it is not someone conditioned by material modes of nature at a particular time and place. So these statements that Prabhupada makes about women's rights and their desire for equality with men are coming directly from Vaikuntha.
Prabhu, what you read just before, that's from your book, Vaishnavism and
Yes.
Social Responsibility, and that doesn't sound to me like Prabhupada's voice, though.
Oh,
That's
no,
your
it's my voice. That's right.
That's your
it's my
voice.
voice. Because
Okay.
what I did is I got Prabhupada's quotes and I just put it into something that flows.
Yeah, I got it. And
yeah.
and people could be about that like, well, you're just making stuff up. And Srila Prabhupada did say that I want my disciples to be like lawyers who can quote chapter and verse. And I can tell you where you will find the bulk of what you just created substantiated by Prabhupada himself, and that's in his purport to Bhagavad Gita 16.7.
Yes.
Where the text is that the demons do not know pravritim cha nivritim cha jananavudurasura. The demons don't know what should be done and not done. Neither cleanliness, truthfulness, nor proper behavior is to be found in them. And in the purport, Srila Prabhupada points exactly to what you're saying there and substantiates it 100%.
That's a very, very powerful purport. And I always ask myself, how do the feminists in ISKCON give a class on that purport?
Hare Krishna.
It
You have
beats
something you
me.
wanna
how they
add, Amor?
lecture on that purport.
Well, you mentioned before, people have their own interpretation. And anyone that reads that, they will get their own interpretation, but not as it is, like what Srila Prabhupada wanted. And for sure, go ahead.
And that's an incredible thing. Prabhupada always presented his qualification by as it is, Bhagavad Gita as it is. This is not my interpretation. It's simply coming down fully transparent from Parampara. This was Prabhupada's qualification. Yet here we have interpretations. There's no interpretation. When Prabhupada said something is black, it's black. When he says it's white, it's white. When he says feminism is a demoniac, puffed up concept of womanly life propagated by demons, that's the truth. There isn't some underlying complexity and intellectual gymnastics that we have to perform in order to kind of somehow try to No, it's very simple. It's very simple. Now, we may not be in a position where we could really surrender to that.
If I could just contribute to what you're saying there, Prabhu, to take the significance away from it, right? Because it's very easy to react to that and be like, oh, you know, male chauvinism due to our conditioning. But what you're saying is broadly applicable. Yesterday, we were in a kitchens place where they make kitchens. 2 workers were there. And I asked if they have a card. He gave me a card. He said, you need to talk to Brad, who's the owner. You know, we're just here like... And I was joking. I said, doing all the work. And he's like, yeah, we just do all the work. And he just like takes all the money. And, you know, what was right there for me to say is, comrade, you need to seize the means of production, you know, like you're the one doing all the work. You should get all the profits. But communism is a puffed up, demonic conception of workers, you know, that like we should seize the means of production and take everything. And it's becoming widespread in America and in the world, but it's completely unwarranted because if you were able to do that, you just go out and start your own business. But there's more to it than just making the kitchen to make a business out of making kitchens, right? There's a lot of thinking and risk and work that needs to go into the Vaishya aspect of the activity. So it's not simply men and women where this shows up. It shows up everywhere. It's the Asuric dialectic. You take one victimized and one victimizer and set them against each other and blow the whole thing up. And I think you had something that you were creating there?
Yes. I see the life of protection. Is it women should be protected, not being given the freedom, and so and so. And I think at some point we touched that area yesterday when we were talking about that. And, you know, as a woman, I love the idea to be protected by a man. And also I love the idea to be able to protect myself. And what does it mean when a woman protecting herself? Being able to behave in such a way that is not ¿cómo se llama esto? Vulgar? Yeah.
Vulgar actually means like public, of the people.
Yeah. Also, direct myself in a way that I don't take attention from other males. Because in that way, I'm basically exposing myself to danger. So there's many ways I can think as a woman, you know, how I want to be protected and how as a woman I want to be protected myself. This is something that I want to do. In order for us to be protected by a male, myself personally, I have no problem being protected by a male. Actually, it's awesome to be protected by a male because I feel safe. This is the way my husband shows his love towards me. And I have no problem with that. It doesn't make me any less than who I am as a spirit soul. It simply means that I am protected because at every step that I take, there is danger. Males are lusting every female that are exposed herself in such a way, they're lusting over her. So maybe not physically that man is touching that woman, but man is lusting with the mind. How do you protect that integrity of your energy as a female? We have to think as well as that, because the idea these days is, oh, females can do whatever they want, they can expose themselves, show their this or show that, and male cannot do anything. It's like, hey, in order for you to protect a man, you also have to be able how to behave. Because we, as a female, I have the duty to protect my husband. And I also, because I know how a male thinks, I have to be able to think, if my husband tells me about how men thinks, obviously there are other males with the same ideas, So how do I protect myself?
And in the Bhagavatam, in the 7th canto, Narada Muni, when he describes the different categories of Varnas, after describing Brahmin, Kshatriya, Vaishya, Shudra, he describes the category of chaste women. And women protect themselves through chastity. And not only do they protect themselves by being chaste, but they protect society. And feminism is the exact opposite of that. Feminism does not promote chastity. Feminism promotes independence, and Prabhupada and Shastra explains that independent women equals to what? Prostitute.
Yep.
That's what Shastra says. So you're right, Mike. You're right. It's chastity. It's that chastity which protects you. It's and that's the chaste women that protect the proliferation of immoral activity. Yes.
May I give a couple of, may I support something that you've just said, Jivan Mukta?
Sure. Go ahead.
In the first canto, 10th chapter, 16th verse, Srila Prabhupada says, shyness is a particular extra-natural beauty of the fair sex, and it commands respect from the opposite sex. The custom was observed even during the days of the Mahabharata, that is, more than 5,000 years ago. It is only the less intelligent persons not well versed in the history of the world who say that observance of separation of female from male is an introduction of the Mohammedan period in India. In the 8th canto, Prabhupada says, Mother Lakshmi, the goddess of fortune, having been properly celebrated with an auspicious ritualistic ceremony, began moving about, holding in her hand a garland of lotus flowers, which were surrounded by humming bumblebees. Smiling with shyness, her cheeks decorated by her earrings, she looked extremely beautiful. A shyness is a gift of nature to the fair sex, and it enhances their beauty and prestige, even if they are of a less important family or even if they are less attractive. We have practical experience of this fact. A sweeper woman commanded the respect of many respectable gentlemen simply by manifesting a lady's shyness. Half-naked ladies in the street do not command any respect, but a shy sweeper's wife commands respect from all. I just wanted to give those quotes.
And it's not just nakedness when it comes to clothing. It's nakedness when it comes to their words. A woman who's not shy in her mode of presenting herself in public and her speaking is likewise unchaste.
Means she shouldn't be in your face. That's what you're saying. She should present things in a
arrogant, loud-mouthed, aggressive women.
Rajasic.
This is mode of ignorance. It's rajasic.
Yeah, it's like because the Grhasta Ashram is a training and development opportunity, and I was married with my first wife for 24 years. Now I'm in my married to my second wife, second marriage, and it's still ongoing training and development for me. And Krishna has perfectly created the opportunity and given me the perfect wife for that. When we were at ProFest, I've been going back, 1 year after, looking at video footage And then I'm seeing videos where I capture my wife at the protest when I wasn't even present to that. She was there. You know, it was like, you know, she's in the background in something. And there's one video during the Sweet Rice Festival. During the cyclone, there was this, it just rained for days. And we just kept doing kirtan nonstop the whole time. And we had a tent. People came in, massive kirtan that Muchukunda led. And we made sweet rice from milk from our protected cow at Nurturing Soul and distributed it to people. And I'm there, and I'm panning across all the people there, and there are ladies there, and they're like smiling and everything. And then I pan across my wife here before, you know, this is the very first day when I encountered her, and she puts her hand up in front of her face like this. And then she's off the camera, and then I'm saying, yeah, we brought sweet rice from our protected cow, you know, Gopika. And then I hear her say, we need to bring the cow here to the parliament. But it was night and day. As you say, the presentation, how the women presented themselves and how kind of out there they were about it. And then since we've been married, we have an agreement now that we don't engage in private conversations with members of the opposite sex. Like if a woman directly messages me on Facebook or WhatsApp or whatever, I don't engage in direct conversations with them without my wife being present. So I'll create a group and say, listen, I have an agreement with my wife that I don't engage in private messaging conversations with women other than my wife. For us to communicate, I can create a group and include her in it, and we can communicate there. And seeing how people react to that has been very interesting. First of all, my own mind wanted to reject that. Like, oh, this is like too extreme and it seems weird and everything. And part of that was like sort of knowing how other people would respond to that. Like, what is this? Like, you know, it's like religious fanaticism or something like that. And so my mind resisted it for quite some time. And now watching how people react to that, it's like a litmus test to see what they do. Some people, some women will say, that's amazing. I wish my relationship with my partner was like that. They're like into it because they recognize it for the protection, the chastity, the commitment that it is. Others freak out completely. And they just flip out.
Also, I'd like to add that
Muchukunda Prabhu hasn't said anything. Prabhu, I would like to hear your feedback on all of this.
Can we just hear Gaura Prabhu's point first and then move to Muchukunda? Thank you.
Very much. Had one sentence. And also the inclusiveness, that the wife will feel included. She'll feel more connected to you, and also no doubts going on or anything. She's involved.
Works for both parties. That works for both parties. I don't want my husband to be thinking, oh my God, what is she talking about? Who is she talking to? You know, it is the most obnoxious feeling that you have, that the mind creates so many things. In order for me to protect myself, I have to be very clear who I'm dealing with and how I deal. And that has been my friendship with males. You know, my husband pointed out something to me. It's like, hey, I see you talking to this person. So yes, it's correct. And I can talk to that person in front of you. And I made very clear to that person, we are friends. And there is nothing between you and me. Is that correct? So the person like, whoa, yeah, for sure. Just want you to understand this, you know, because I don't mind telling people, I can be very loving and friendly to you. It doesn't mean that I'm extending myself to be liked by you. Simply is out of my joy of who I am as a person, a caring, a loving person, naturally that comes to me. Yet there is boundaries there. And I have to be very clear from the beginning. This is my boundary. And if I feel very uncomfortable by the look or the way the person presents itself, I cut it off. Absolutely cut it off. And I can understand if I can see this one, for sure females will get the same. And my job is to protect my husband.
Are you initiated by anyone?
I was going to be, but hey, no, not yet.
Don't. don't get initiated by anyone unless it's the same, person that your husband is initiated by. And this leads us to a whole other thing that we discussed last night, the whole, kind of, perverse situation we've got right now where all these single women are initiated by these sannyasis, and some husbands, their wives are initiated by a different guru, and she's interacting with this other guru and establishing a relationship with him over and above her husband. It's just perverse.
I don't know if
Jivan
that's on the
Mukta
list of questions, Gaura.
Sorry.
Is it?
Yeah, I just wanted to respond quickly to Jivan Mukta, how he's also shared the point with me in the past, how the husband also is acting in the role of spiritual master to the wife as well.
That's
And then,
how it.
how about we go to Muchukunda now?
Yes.
Because we're about to go off on a whole other canto.
That's such a good topic, though. I'm really interested to hear other views on it. But yeah, I just thought I'd share like what it was like for me in my last relationship that failed, and it's totally this point of feminism and how it corrupts both men and women and destroys relationships, actually. Yeah, in my last relationship that failed, my my whole attitude was like, you're your own person, and like that Srila Prabhupada said words to the effect of a husband should control his wife. And I just completely missed that, when I went through Srila Prabhupada's books. And so how my relationship looked was like no control, like, because I don't want to be controlling, I don't, my wife's her own person, and, just contaminated by a feminist kind of thinking. I'd call women Prabhu. I would, encourage them, hey, why don't you lead the kirtan? That's the person I was, very like that side of things, like left thinking. And my father-in-law pulled me aside one day and took me to a cafe when we were visiting the US, which is where she was from. And he said, I'll just say why he pulled me aside. So there were her parents, her mother and my father-in-law at the time were asking what our plans were. Like, what are you going to stay in Philadelphia here, or are you going to move on? And I kind of just like let her do the talking. I didn't like take the lead. I wasn't being responsible for where we were going or what we were doing. And I said, I didn't say anything in that. She did the talking. And so my father-in-law pulled me aside and said, I don't see that you're wearing the pants in this relationship. And at the time I was kind of like, yeah, you're right, I guess. But that was the first time I'd really gotten present to like that concept of like, hey, I should be wearing the pants. I should be taking leadership. I should be like providing direction for our family. I just wasn't at all. And ultimately we got divorced. I guess I didn't ever take on that advice fully. And then I started seeing other relationships failing as well, like God brothers, like who were being divorced by their wives. It wasn't that they divorced their wife. Srila Prabhupada said divorce is usually a weakness of the woman. And I was like, I was talking to one God
Did
sister
he say
about
that?
this,
Hang
like,
on a
what do you
second.
say?
Did he say that?
Yes, I've seen that.
Yeah, I've seen that.
I'll find it.
Yeah, thank you, Prabhu. It's just that, especially in this topic or any topic that's contentious or emotionally laden, Because I noticed you also said that Prabhupada said words to the effect of that a husband should control his wife. And it's kind of like to the effect of, did he say it? Where did he say it? It's like, if you're going to say Prabhupada said it, you got to be able to bring the quote or the reference immediately. I just want to make that point.
Okay. Yeah, I got it. Thank you. So I was talking to one Vaishnava about this, like all these divorces that were happening. And I said, can you see, like, what do you think is at the source of all of these divorces? I've got some ideas, but what do you think? And they said, I'm not really sure. And I said, well, I think it's that these men aren't wearing the pants in their relationship. Like that was the case for me. And I think that that's what's going on in these relationships too. The men aren't providing the leadership. And at the source of that, I think it's their guru isn't empowering the men's leadership. If anything, he's empowering the woman. There seems to be a kind of feminist thing. Well, there's feminism has contaminated our yatra, such that the men are kind of like, the women are very independent. The men don't control their wives. They don't bring the leadership. They're not giving, and they're also not giving them children. Anyways, so I said that, and she said, yeah, I think you're 100% on the money.
I have the quote for you if you like how divorce takes place due to womanly weakness. Anytime you want.
Go ahead.
Let's hear it.
Okay, translation. This is coming from the 4th canto, 4th chapter, 3rd verse. Translation. Thereafter, Sati left her husband, Lord Shiva, who had given her half his body due to affection. Breathing very heavily because of anger and bereavement, she went to the house of her father. This less intelligent act was due to her being a weak woman. Purport. According to the Vedic conception of family life, the husband gives half his body to his wife, and the wife gives half of her body to her husband. In other words, a husband without a wife or a wife without a husband is incomplete. Vedic marital relationship existed between Lord Shiva and Sati, but sometimes due to weakness, a woman becomes very much attracted by the members of her father's house. And this happened to Sati. In this verse, it is specifically mentioned that she wanted to leave such a great husband as Shiva because of her womanly weakness. In other words, womanly weakness exists even in the relationship between husband and wife. Generally, separation between husband and wife is due to womanly behavior. Divorce takes place due to womanly weakness. The best course for a woman is to abide by the orders of her husband. That makes family life very peaceful. Sometimes there may be misunderstandings between husband and wife, as found even in such an elevated family relationship as that of Sati and Lord Shiva. But a wife should not leave her husband's protection because of such a misunderstanding. If she does so, it is understood to be due to her womanly weakness. Unquote.
Yeah.
Yeah, thank you.
Prabhu,
Yeah.
Prabhu, one of the very significant points you brought up, which has never really come to the surface and have been addressed within the community of devotees, is the tremendously poisonous effect on marriages and relationships that this guru system and his system of initiation that has been established has on the couples. Tremendously undermines the authority of the man in the household. It is I would say a primary cause of a woman feeling in the guise of being surrendered to her guru. She ends up becoming independent from her husband's authority, which completely undermines what marriage is. In fact, marriage is where the wife sees the husband as a representative of Krishna, the husband as her guru.
Yeah. Yeah.
And when the wife's heart is gone, when the wife's heart has been stolen in that way, what's left for the husband?
100%.
There's nothing there.
Yeah. Yeah, and it seems to take place due to like I'd have to admit that if I was a guru I'd probably do this too, which is probably why it's best not for sannyasis not to have female disciples.
Hare Krishna.
But it's alpha dogging. It's like, hey, I'm the sannyasi, I'm the most spiritually advanced here. You know, essentially, the messaging that's there is like, your husband is also my disciple. Like, he's not as qualified as me. That it's an undermining of the leadership of the husband and the listening of the woman.
Absolutely.
Dogging.
You brought up a very, very important point there. Absolutely. And the woman is enamored by, the renunciation of the sannyasi, and her husband's just an attached, buffoon.
Yeah. That's how it looks, yeah.
He's attached, he's attached. He's on the material bodily platform. But meanwhile, this man is like that.
He's the alpha.
He's completely detached. Everything about him is just so transcendental. And women, the psychology is that they're attracted to that they think that they can't have.
Yeah, 100%.
So, the very thing that attracts them is this sense of him being unapproachable because he's so spiritual and so transcendental. But my husband, he's just like, I do his laundry, and I hear him pass gas, and I hear him
I get him to do the laundry. I can control him.
Right. So he's just like, some little schmuck who kind of brings up some, he helps pay the mortgage. It's instead the gurus, these people here should not initiate anyone, that their instruction flows through the husband. And this will totally change the dynamic in every ISKCON marriage, every devotee marriage. The dynamics will completely change. Completely.
Because the husband will be more empowered.
Yes.
Yeah, it's in network marketing, it's a principle called edification, which is you recognize that your network marketing business is a network structure and it needs to have devolution of authority and power in it, leadership. And you as a leader need to be constantly using whatever influence you have in the listening of the people in that network to strengthen the influence that other people have. So as the guru, you're increasing the authority and influence of your disciple who is the leader in that household, and you're keeping that disciple trued up and straight, and you know that if you undermine them, you actually weaken the network. The idea is not to accumulate all the power into one single node and just be like the big one with the 10,000 people in a flat hierarchy underneath you. The idea is to create this massively expanding network. And the way you do that is through the devolution of authority and influence. And there is a science to how you use your influence to increase the influence and authority of the nodes in the network and not tear it down. And I can see that you have women coming, they're single, they get initiated, then they get married. But then there becomes a whole dance of like how to, redirect her devotion to her husband and to reinforce him as the authority. And then, of course, in the back of your mind as a guru, you're like, what happens if the marriage fails? I don't want to lose two people. And I've heard gurus speak in that way, like, oh, these two devotees, they got married like that, and then I'm going to lose both of them. It's kind of like if the guy goes away, if I can keep the female disciple and she keeps doing service and everything in my organization, then at least I kept one of them. I don't want to lose both of them. I've literally heard a guru speak in that way about the situation. But that actually guarantees a high rate of failure in the marriages in your network because you're approaching it in that way. You're attached to retaining, the devotion of these people rather than building a Varnashram society. That is my conclusion. You want to?
Yeah, I can see that, when from a female perspective, before I met Sitapati, obviously I talked to Swami, one of Swami that was aspiring to. And it's easy because, like you say, women see this hard to get and they get attracted to that. It's true, It's nothing more attractive than a man is hard to get and, they are manly with the pants on. It's attractive, for sure, because it takes so much for someone to be that way. It's natural for a female because females are trying to find who is the alpha male to have children with.
Mm-hmm.
It is just that is just the way how it is. So in order for you to be an alpha male, you have to train yourself. Not only in the scriptures, as well in developing your character, your skills, all the abilities you want to, and then you're going to attract someone that is actually to your level. As otherwise, incompatibility kicks in after some time, and then I rather go to my guru and I follow the instructions of my guru than my husband, because he doesn't even know what he wants to do in his life. It is just the reality as a female. As a female, what am I going to do looking after a guy and also looking after a child? That's when things become very boring for a female. Mm-hmm. And I'm talking as a female. It becomes absolutely boring. I have a big child and I have the little child. It's consuming, emotionally consuming.
And this dynamic guarantees a high rate of failure in the marriages, because the only guys who are going to stick around in that environment are going to be these beta males who are going to take it. They're not going to go, hey, listen up, this doesn't work. Mm-hmm. Not this guy doing this with my wife. Those kind of guys will go away. And then what you'll be left with is you'll be left with all these disciples who are sucking it up and allowing this dynamic to happen. And then the women are going to be like, well, this sucks. I'm bored of this guy. And so, the dynamic of being like the alpha male and directly taking the devotion of the women like that and undermining the authority of these men means that the men who do stay are the ones that the women are not going to be attracted to. And so you're guaranteeing a high rate of failure in your marriages and your organization.
Mm. And also we need to look into the character of the swamis these days, because in my observation is they have a lot of female disciples. They know how exactly to work in the emotions of the females, and they have them serving, and yeah. And if they get to marry, basically the male is not much the male. They try, but the female is just like the boss there. And males don't know how to assert themselves, assert who they are as a husband, put themselves in a leadership position. That is another thing. Males need a lot of training these days. Now, a female, my guru, you recommend get your same guru as your husband. It's like, sure, I could. But first, I have to see the character of my guru, because you don't know, time will tell. There are many gurus that are enjoying so much their position as a gurus. They are, female disciples, and God knows what else happens in their heads. I'm not diminishing people, but the person that comes forward is the person that say, my dear daughter, find yourself a husband. Husband, take care of this female. Because gurus are like a fathers to their disciples. They should be doing this, rather than just like, oh, I want you to do service. I just want to get more of this, more of that. It's like, great, we want to do a devotional service. But we need to see the material needs of the females and males too. How do we develop the Varnashram ashram if you're just going to have like a millions of disciple females, and males is just like, oh gosh, I don't know if I really want to get married. I don't know, my relationship is not working. My wife is just going here to the guru and is just more loyal and listen more to the guru than to their husbands. And how a female is going to develop that? A unity in their family, strong family relationship, if this is not gonna happen, because you're not married to your guru, you are married to your husband, and perform your duties as a woman in that area.
Mm-hmm.
In a very real sense, the failure of the husband to perform there is on the wife, because she actually can create him. You know, it's well known that woman is the energy of man, Srila Prabhupada said, and they're saying that behind every great man is a great woman. When women know how to take their Shakti and pour it into someone like that, they actually create that man. But by dividing it and taking it away from him like that, he doesn't really stand much of a chance.
And that's where we come back full circle to chastity and shyness. When a wife is chaste and shy and totally sold out to her husband, the husband generally, there's always exceptions, but generally the husband is prepared to go to the end of the earth for her and for his family. That's our nature. That's what we, not only is our nature, that's what we need to do. That's what we're compelled to do by our very nature of being males. That's what fully satisfies us as within our material social obligations and social responsibilities. But when you're not, even the Shastra advises you immediately leave that woman. When you have a woman who's presents these feminist type of qualities, what does the Shastra say? Leave her. Dump her. You're gone. There's no karma for that.
Could you provide a reference for that, Prabhu? I've never heard that.
Prabhu, Gaura, I don't know if you could, it's in the 4th canto somewhere.
Do you remember
should immediately leave a wife who is not submissive to him.
Is that the words roughly?
Yeah, check in the 4th canto. It's husband, leave wife, something like that. I forget exactly where the reference was.
And and it's the same for females. If your husband is behaving in such a dharmic way, is not a
Adharmic, yes.
Yeah, if your husband is behaving in a dharmic way, is not karmic. You won't have the karmic reaction to leave your husband. So it is both for both parties, I have to say.
Well, if you go by Shastra, Prabhupada in the 7th canto explains that you can leave a Naradama, a husband who's Naradama. You can separate from him. But it's also stated that the wife should not remarry. So there's different rules. That's the whole point, that there's no equality here. What goes for the man doesn't necessarily mean it goes for the woman. So yes, the woman can leave a man who's Naradama. But
There's like,
she stayed.
so in Bhagavad Gita 5.4, Krishna says that the path of analytical study of the material world, or Sankhya, and that of Karma Yoga, devotional service, lead to the same result. One who applies himself equally well to one achieves the results of both. So let me explain the point that you have made there, Prabhu, from Shastra on the basis of analytical study of material nature. So if a woman is married to a man and he is adharmic, she has the responsibility and the opportunity to pour all of her energy into transforming him. And if she has like an easy out, like I'll just swap him for another one, she's just not going to do that. Whereas if she's in a situation where it's like, it's this one or nothing, it means that she will put everything that she has into transforming that situation. Also, knowing that that's the situation in the future, it means that women will be more careful about who they do marry, and they'll be more open to taking the advice of their father, who understands their nature and has, can see to some degree the future. Astrology, advice from friends and families. If you don't have that, what will happen is that marriage will become, as the Bhagavatam says in the 12th canto, simply a matter of agreement between a man and a woman who live together, and then they break it on the basis of disagreement. And then it becomes this situation where what you're trying to do is you're trying to find the one. And if you notice, this has become the dominant conversation in the West about marriage, is it's about magically finding the one, like it's a lottery. and you just got to keep buying lottery tickets until you find the winning lottery ticket, right? And so women will go from one relationship to another and find themselves to be increasingly unfulfilled, unprotected, and losing their youth while they do it. And at the same time, they find themselves competing with many other women who are doing the same thing. So the men's options become unlimited, the quality ones that all the women want, and so they will not commit to any woman at all. And in this way, this is sexual economics and evolutionary, biological economics. It leads to the same conclusion that you may not like what the Shastra says, and you're like, I wish it wasn't that way. But when you examine the economics of the situation, you find out that the Shastra advises people to act in such a way that it does align with their long-term interest. So I've now described the same point from the perspective of analytical material nature.
And their long-term interest is spiritual. It's liberation. It's achieving love of God. That's ultimately what we're aiming for. So this material situation is temporary. I mean, we also have examples of women who stayed with the greatest demons, Ravana, Hiranyakashipu. Like these were, beyond Naradama. Yet the women, Prabhupada states that the wives are exemplary because the wives were chaste to their husband, although the husband was a demon.
I have a good example in relation to that, Prabhu, how far the community of devotees has diverged from Dharma. That a devotee in the community here in New Zealand communicated directly to my wife and counseled her to leave me. And I said this, I challenged him to physical combat. He's like, I can't remember what he said. I said, anyway, let's settle this with a Vaishnava wrestling match between men that you've done this. I said, not even the wife of Dhritarashtra, who is the cause of the Kurukshetra war. He drove the whole thing due to his attachment. His wife Gandhari is celebrated for her chastity to her husband, even though he was so adharmic himself in what he did there. And nobody counseled her, leave your husband. So what to speak of counseling a Vaishnavi to leave her Vaishnava husband? It's just off the reservation in so many ways. It's crazy.
Probably she didn't leave him because he had the kingdom. Oops.
The same thing happened to me during the Profest. I think it's interesting to see parallels between those who were black and white about the Sastra and therefore went to Profest, because it says in the book, chant Hare Krishna in all circumstances. It's the most auspicious thing. No inauspiciousness can come from chanting Hare Krishna. And then also, we have black and white things about this topic. I think that, there's something that unites us, that has us be, all in this conversation, and we've both, we're all the same way about the principles of the Sastra, that they're to be taken literally.
As they are.
So, as it is, yeah. So when I was at Profest, a member of our community here also counseled my wife in the same way. A married man, FaceTime, video called my fiance and said, you could do so much better, and like that. And
I found the quote, by the way. I found the quote.
What's that?
I found the quote. It's if a person, it's in Prabhupada's purport, fourth canto, 26th chapter, verse 15. Prabhupada says, if a person has neither a mother nor a pleasing wife at home, he should leave home and go to the forest, because for him, there's no difference between the forest and home.
Yeah, Chanakya Pandit says the same thing. If you have a wife who doesn't speak sweet words,
yes,
better to go to the forest. Yeah.
Yeah.
So
I want to elaborate.
Go ahead. Sorry.
I just want to throw something in on the end of what Muchukunda Prabhu was saying about what happened to him in Profest. So, my son, Prahlad Nrsinga, he's 20 years old now. He would have been 19 back then. I told him about it. This is how Prabhupada, Bhaktivedanta red-pilled he is. He's like, what? He told her to leave him, and he didn't even say, like, here's my boy, so-and-so das, It's kind of like, if you're going to be like mafioso controlling, that kind of way, go all the way. Like, have your guy that you're like, leave this guy, here's one of my boys, Because that's what you're doing. Let's just be straight about it. You're out here, collecting up all these women as part of your mafia organization. That's what you're doing. You're not acting according to Dharma. You're acting according to, well, it's adharma, obviously, but it's the biological imperative of amassing power and wealth to yourself, Hiranyakashipu style.
I told
And
you
just to add to how it's adharmic, like you're saying better to be alone with no protection of any man than to be with this Vaishnava because I don't agree with his political, basically because he's at Profest and I have a whole new philosophy about why chanting at protests is the wrong time and the wrong place. I'd rather you be alone than with someone who does that.
Yeah, just before Jivan Mukta, before you
said, come and be with me as a second wife.
Yes, that was Prahlad just corrected me. He said you didn't quote me correctly. He was like, he should have introduced, here's my boy so-and-so Das, because if you're not going to marry her, like you have to provide some option alternative to this guy rather than just nothing. Yeah. Mic drop.
Completely.
Yeah, going back to...
Okay,
go.
No, I told the story yesterday, but I'll tell it again. Same thing happened to me. It wasn't that I didn't because I went to a protest, but when I was just newly married, because I was looking at establishing a business, it's a lot of work. I was up later than usual, so I wasn't able to get up at 3:00 in the morning and go to Mangal Artik, for 4:15, and I would be at the temple usually by 6. So my wife would be there earlier, and I would be there a little later. And I was initiated by Kirtanananda. She was initiated by Gopal Krishna Maharaj. So one morning she returns home, and I see her very distressed, very disturbed. And I asked her, what's wrong? She says, oh, well, Gopal Krishna Maharaj, spoke to me, and he's not happy that you're late for Mangal Artik. And I said, yes, well, you know why, right? Because I'm working and I just need my rest. I don't have time during the day to take a nap like these sannyasis do. And so she told me that he approached her and said, look, Jivan Mukta's in Maya. And, I'm going back to India in a week. Why don't you come back to India? I'll look at, we'll care for you. We'll get you. So you could imagine how I felt, right? So I immediately went to the temple, asked to see him, went into his room, offered my obeisances and said, Maharaj, Prabhupada says that someone who interferes in one's marriage is the enemy. You have always presented yourself as my friend. I said, I beg you, do not ever interfere in my relationship with my wife again. Don't ever talk to her again without my participation. He apologized, and it never happened again. Never happened again. And as I said last night, one of the important factors in this situation was that my wife accepted my authority over her guru. Because if she was like many other women, she would have felt that I offended her guru and may have left me. And of course, if that had happened, it'd be good riddance anyway. I don't want to be with someone like that anyway. But she did stay with me because she had enough sense to know that if you're going to choose someone strictly on who's going to look after you better,
Right.
I am the one who the reason is not going to Mangal Artik early in the morning is because I'm struggling to get a financial base together to look after you and our future children. Your spiritual master is going to ship you to India and basically leave you to your own, by yourself there, trying to just figure out your life and trying to start it all over again.
So adharmic, that he didn't approach you and say, hey, Jivan Mukta, I noticed that you're struggling here. What can I do to empower what you're up to,
Unbelievable.
Muchukunda...
You know what? How many times has that happened to others?
Countless. I mean, Muchukunda's father-in-law at least pulled him aside and said, hey, looks like, I can see that this is not going to work and, here's some contribution. He didn't pull his daughter aside and say, hey, how about you leave this loser? And maybe he did. I don't know. But, yeah. You want to add something to that?
Yeah. Prabhu Jivan Mukta, you were saying before about like leaving a woman and so. Women mostly won't leave their husbands. If their husbands are so committed to the relationship and they're doing their best, woman will not leave her husband because they are so immersed and so in love. We are emotional beings. Where we find comfort, emotional, psychological, physical, and spiritual, it will be crazy for a woman to leave that household. But Vaishnavas that we know, this is the way how we should be. I don't want to use the word should. It sounds a bit too much. We would like to create ourselves as the Vedic wives and follow the instructions of Srila Prabhupada. I'm sure there are many females, trying to do that. And myself for sure. It's a everyday work. I will be, it's crazy. I have to say it's crazy that I can leave my husband that is that quality man.
I don't know how far off schedule and off the reservation we are with Gaura Prabhu's questions here, but we're like exploring the space. So, the reading into that, because you hear a Vaishnavi say something like that, a lady, a female devotee, and then it's like, but how come so many relationships are breaking up? I'm going to make an assertion about what's going on. I was watching Hridayananda Das Goswami speaking in his tour in South America the other day on Facebook. And he was doing an initiation, and he was talking about the regulative principles. And he was sitting at a conference table wearing like a suit or something. It was an interesting environment. But he was saying, Prabhupada, he said this is a big problem in the society. Is Prabhupada had two standards for what he considered illicit sex. One was sex only for procreation within marriage. And then he had another standard which was not, as high a standard, which is sex outside of marriage. And he said, he said, I've brought this up so many times with the leaders, and their failure to kind of socialize this in the organization has been the cause of so many problems. I'm up in the comment section, and I'm like, make it very clear that doesn't mean that using contraception is it's an attempt to thwart the course of nature and to enjoy without taking responsibility for something. That is completely demonic. So my point here is that, and I said this to Urmila Devi Dasi jokingly, because she wrote that book called According to Religious Principles. I don't know if you've seen that book. It's about Grhasta life and Prabhupada's things. I was joking with her. I said two things semi-jokingly. The first one was, my understanding from reading these books is that Krishna consciousness, our program, is theocratic fascism. Which she was like, don't say that. And then the other joke I had with her was I said, actually what Prabhupada said was not contrary to religious principles. He didn't say according, he said not contrary to religious principles. And that slight rewording there has caused so many problems in the Grhasta ashram, because not contrary to religious principles is different to according to religious principles. But my point here is that if you say sex inside marriage for procreation, it means not just that we only have sex because, you know, we want to procreate. It's like when we have sex, we procreate, we have children, and we maintain those children. And if you have a look at the pastime of Devahuti and Kardamamuni, I think it's very instructive in that you have these two things going on at the same time. One is the public expression and experience of Devahuti is that she is completely this chaste, ascetic, Vaishnavi saint. But then there's this other side to the whole thing, which takes place in this palace behind the clouds, out of the view of the public. And that's a whole different story. We're talking like, I mean, this is just the straight Bhagavatam, but she's having a nine-way gangbang with her husband, who expands himself 9 times, and then Prabhupada says women are 9 times more lusty than their husbands. And it's like, you have to make sure that your wife is perfectly satisfied emotionally in the relationship, that, you know, these devotees, I don't know what they're doing or how they're doing it, that they get married and they have no children or 1 child. And then their wives are like leaving them, and everybody's wondering what's going on. It's like, you know, when and I'm going to make a huge leap in the analytical Sankhya here, but Muchukunda Prabhu was saying, like, my father-in-law pulled me aside and said, you're not wearing the pants. That's the result of an old school man from like the old school interacting with someone who's 2 or 3 generations deep in a society that uses contraception to fundamentally alter the sexual dynamics between men and women. And these devotees who are getting married and not having children are still at the effect of that. And I say, with no evidence to support it and for no reason, that, you know, the success of your Grihasta ashram, Jivan Mukta Prabhu, is like, you have 7 children. I'm like, here's a guy who's keeping it real.
I used to ask that question too. I said, it's like, actually, I not only within our movement, because it's there in our movement as well. I joked with my relatives in Italy, because here we have the center of Catholicism, right? Italy. And, you know, the Vatican ostensibly is against contraception, right? So I said to, you know, my relatives there, I said, you know, I don't know about you guys here. I said, you know, you have the lowest birth rate in the world, practically speaking. I said, you're supposedly all Catholics. I said, either you're all saints, or you're all hypocrites. So it's like, you know, how is it possible? How is it possible that on the one hand, you're like, no contraception, because that's what the Pope says, and that's what Catholicism says. And then on the other hand, you have the lowest birth rate in the world.
How did they respond?
Well, they just laughed uncomfortably off, you know.
That's their response.
Jivan Mukta Prabhu. It's an example for for male figures in the society of Krishna consciousness, that they have to take seriously the responsibility as a man. You did what you did in order to bring a family, a comfort for your future children, and you sacrifice it. And that's exactly what we need. Males, they say, okay, you know, I'm getting married because I'm going to have children, in order for them to continue serving Krishna. And those children are not any ordinary children. You just going to bring it because, you know, out of whatever, you bring children to this world. And you're taking the steps to raise those children in a situation where they are well looked after. You're protecting them, you're caring for them in the way you do it. That's what we need right now. We need male devotees to say, you know what, I'm getting married, I'm going to do and work really hard because sacrifices makes a man's character.
It's true.
That's
True.
how
And
it
that's
is.
why, and that's
You can-
that's why when we were in high school and we sacrificed, I don't know if any of you were like on sports teams or anything like that, but any type of sacrifice that you made, any austerity, whether it was in athletics or that builds your character. And as we were discussing last night, you know, Grhasta life is a different type of austerity, that you're given the provision of enjoying this heavenly, you know, sex pleasure, but there's another austerity that comes with it. It's the austerity, first of all, of keeping the relationship together between man and woman, because in many respects, we're so incompatible. It's incredible that we can keep it together. Really is amazing. And that's an austerity. And then there's the austerity of taking the financial responsibility to start, and ultimately the spiritual responsibility of guiding and protecting because protection isn't just financial. Ultimately, the protection is spiritual, protecting your soul from rebirth. And that is the austerity of the Grihasta. And by the time you're 50, by the time you've gone, or a little later, by the time your kids are old and you feel it, you feel that detachment naturally welling up inside of you. You naturally feel that, you know what? I get it. I'm done with this now. It's a natural progression. And this is Krishna's system. This is the system that Krishna established. This is the Varnashram system that Krishna established. In the 7th canto, when Yudhishthira Maharaj asked Narada Muni about, you know, explaining religious principles, and Narada began, describing the Varnashram system, Narada said, I will explain to you what I have heard directly from Lord Narayan. So Narada Muni didn't say that this is what I heard. He specifically said that this is the information that I got directly from Krishna, and then he went up and described the entire system of Varna and Ashram. So it's very, very significant. And again, we go back to feminism. Feminism is completely contrary to anything that you will find in the Varnashram system. There is nothing remotely close to feministic principles within Varnashram.
Yeah, it's Sorry, I'll just add this one thing to Jivan Mukta Prabhu's point, Muchukunda. It is like, the responsibility of the employer to make sure that the workers are happy and well looked after. Anyone who runs a business understands that, and that's how a business works. It's not that the workers should overthrow the business owners and then make it all belong to the workers. It's that we should steward the animals that are in our care. The cows and the chickens that we have, we take care of them. We have a symbiotic relationship with them. It's not that the animals should overthrow the humans, in like ultimate vegan end state where it's all the same thing. And it's the same thing with parents and children. Not that the children should overthrow the parents and then, have their playtime fantasies turned into a surgical procedure. It's that the parents should look after the children, and between men and women, it's the same thing. The relationships are there, and there's a healthy state of those, there's an unhealthy state of those, and then there's this idea that we should overthrow them and do away with them, and that's not to be found anywhere. It's the scriptural expression is the healthy state of relationships between the Varnas, between animals and humans, demigods and humans, between men and women.
Yeah, Prabhu, I'd love to share with you a verse from the Manu Samhita, and it really totals or adds weight to what Danna said right in the beginning there about I love being protected by a man, and I also want to protect myself. And the Manu Samhita says, a man who has chosen a bride must not allow friendship with any other woman to interfere with his devotion to her. He must keep his desires and affections solely for his wife, and she in turn must keep herself only for him. So when I was going through the Mani Samhita a little bit recently, my wife pointed out this verse because it said that, yeah, the man, it's not the highest form of protection of your woman if it's just coming from the man. The highest form of protection and chastity is when the woman is also protecting herself from other men. Not that the man just says, hey, well, don't talk to other men privately, or what are you doing, holding her accountable to chastity. It's when she herself, it comes from her. She's like, yeah, hey, I don't, she has the boundaries for herself. So yeah, I just wanted to bring that up.
I had a reference when we were discussing this situation regarding the different standards of illicit sex. This is a purport. Rahugana converses with Jadabharat. This is text number 10, Srila Prabhupada's purport, right near the end. He says, he's discussing illicit sex, and he says, consequently, in this Krishna consciousness movement, the devotees are forbidden to have illicit sex. Thus, they avoid so many difficulties. One should remain satisfied with one woman, being duly married. One can satisfy one's lusty desires with his wife without creating disturbances in society and being punished for doing so.
Mm.
So the point is that obviously, if you have lusty desire, you're getting married because you have lusty desires. Otherwise, there's no way that most men would associate with women. There's nothing that would draw us to them. It's lusty desire, ultimately. So you have your wife, you work through your material desires, and ultimately, when you follow the devotional practices, we become cleansed of that desire. And then we assume the mentality of vanaprasthas. And ultimately, we accept the renunciation of sannyas. Sannyas doesn't mean that we have to necessarily wear the clothing of sannyas. Sannyas is in our heart. That mentality of sannyas is something that we develop within our hearts. And that comes by following this process.
Guru, I wonder if there is a mentality of like taking sannyas, like, okay, I'm going to leave my family, like leave my one woman now that she's older and not as attractive anymore, and become sannyas, and then get all the women, all the young women.
Yeah, that's right. Yes.
Prabhus, we've hit the 2-hour mark here, and we've covered one of the questions. So it might be a good idea for us to address the other questions in future episodes. And then we can also have a variety of interlocutors join us for those future episodes. Would that be okay with you if we do that? Checkpoint the... Okay, thank you. And I'd like to invite Gaura Das to close us out with your kind of reflections and realizations as the senior member of this Sangha to have the last word.
Excuse me one second. Before Prabhu Gaura has the last word, could I just make a suggestion?
Yeah, please.
I have some of these, I think we've all heard some of these arguments of the feminists within ISKCON. For example, that Prabhupada, despite all of this evidence, Shastric evidence in Prabhupada's purports and everything else, we have some of these kind of original hippie devotees. And, I don't want to use that in a pejorative way, but, they kind of grew out of that hippie movement that are saying that Prabhupada adjusted the principles of Shastra in order to plant the seed of devotional service. within the American society. And that adjustment is what we are going by at this point. Prabhupada adjusted. He allowed men and women, girls and boys to stay in the same ashram. He made so many concessions. And there's a purport specifically in the Chaitanya Charitamrita that Prabhupada addresses that. So I think these are points that I would love to bring up in our next conversation and just kind of, unpack it just to see how it's being misrepresented. Even Prabhupada's purport in Chaitanya Charitamrita is being misrepresented in order to push this agenda, this feminist agenda.
Okay, let's add that to the checkpoint.
I think it's a
Sorry,
good idea.
Send that to me, Jivan Mukta. Go ahead, Danna.
I think it's a great idea for that, because the purpose, well, we haven't created a beginning. The purpose of this is being open-minded and follow the tradition of the Vedic lifestyle. We need to find a way of transform ourselves in a way that we are following what Srila Prabhupada wanted to. Obviously, we want the freedom to do whatever we want. And that is just natural for every living entity, I just want to do what I want. I want to have freedom for this. I want to have freedom for that. But let's discover what else can take us from this conversation, and having other people's input or devotees' input will be awesome. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Over to you, Gaura Prabhu.
Yeah, it's a great honor for me to participate here. So many thoughts churning in my brain, reflecting on my own personal life. I didn't even mention when I was introducing myself that between becoming temple president in Montreal and then the reason I got free to travel with 5 sannyasis across America is because my marriage failed. And I'm not going to point fingers at anybody, except I've tried to be in the habit of pointing them at myself rather than playing the blame game. At the same time, I'm not trying to be, effeminate either, but I just think it's very healthy, in retrospect, to look back. Okay, I could have been more empathic towards, understanding my wife's needs and my wife's concerns, instead of trying, how easy it is, how Sangha is so vital. I remember, I don't know about you, Jivan Mukta Prabhu, in terms of what guidance you got from anybody, if anybody, in terms of navigating a successful marriage, other than Prabhupada's books, and also maybe coming from a grounded family, a nice, big, loving Italian family, perhaps that had a wholesome effect and foundation for you. But yeah, it's like this discussion is so valuable because I see it as a tool for current generation and future generations of devotees to listen to this and to hear what we've all gone through. Jivan Mukta's, very unique personality, having had so many children. And how many years have you been married now, Jivan Mukta?
38.
Yeah, so you're going to go down in the Guinness Book of Records for Hare Krishna marriages. 38. That says a lot about Sita, Devi, Dasi, your good wife, and about yourself. Because, I had one godbrother come and live with me for 3.5 months, and a few years back before he had an accident.
We live separately now, though, by the way. So we're separate.
But you get together from time to time. So
like a Vaishnava situation, Jivan Mukta Prabhu, like what's the context?
Yeah, kind of it just kind of developed that way. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so this is a scientific system. Krishna has created it. Prabhupada has given it to us. And if we can just learn from each other, learn from Srila Prabhupada. I really like Jivan Mukta's point about well, he didn't use, I'm paraphrasing, we need to put our Prabhupada glasses on. We need to see the world as Prabhupada sees it. And I know that Jivan Mukta is a very fervent reader of Prabhupada's books. He just goes through the whole Chaitanya Charitamrita, finishes that, then goes back to the beginning of the Bhagavatam, finishes all of that. So he's a great inspiration to me. All of you are. And yeah, we're you use the term unpacking. That's what we're doing right now. We're unpacking. We're discussing, as Danna said last night, okay, we've discussed the problems. What are the solutions? So who would have thought that looking at the influence of feminism in ISKCON and how that can be curtailed and how men can become more empowered by their supportive wives is actually a foundational principle in having a healthy ISKCON, in having healthy Hare Krishna communities. So yeah, that's a big topic, and we touched on it today. And I think that's very valuable. And I look forward to hearing from more guests. And I don't know how you want to conduct it, Sitapati, if you would like Jivan Mukta to come back next time, or myself, or Muchukunda, or maybe you need to think of.
Yeah, yeah, for sure. Because we are starting here, and then as the podcast go on, we will develop more, and more things will come up. And then if we need to add more people, or if people want to be here and take part of this, they're welcome to come here. Because what we need to do now here is empowering. This is about empowerment, transformation, sharing, Many people, we make so many mistakes. How can we teach the new generation, don't do the same thing, Obviously, everyone has their own life, They have their own karma to carry, but there are certain principles that are important in every life that we need to follow. Let's not make generation by generation the same mistake.
Yeah, and we've got that list of the questions, and we've only done the first one so far. And then the next one, Jivan Mukta Prabhu hinted at it, which is about the issue of child protection. So, we've kind of started to open that up. And, I think on this basis, we have a shot at talking about child protection in a way where we can actually delineate the solution. I notice most of the conversation is about the problem, and that's great because it's been swept under the rug for so long. But then it's also about ascribing blame and punishing people, but where's the actual solution? So that I think is a great topic for our next episode.
Ditto. Agreed.
Yeah.
There's just even what we discussed today. I mean, there's just, we just touched upon certain things, like that whole guru situation, is such an important point. It's so fundamental to many of the problems, as you, Prabhu, Muchukunda Prabhu, you yourself experienced. I mean, these are very, very serious issues that are not really even discussed. Where do you find that subject even being mentioned?
Well, it's considered an aparad because it's criticism. I think there's an important distinction between criticism and blasphemy. Criticism is a good thing.
Yes.
What do you say?
Anyway, we're going to keep going on here.
Yeah,
sure.
we could do. Anything more that you wanted to say to conclude, Gaura Prabhu?
No, I just think I'm grateful that you've started this, and I think you're the man to do it. Hosting others, this is great, and Jivan Mukta is ocean of realizations to share it. It's great that we're hearing also from a younger generation, from Muchukunda Prabhu. So I'm very satisfied, and I'm grateful to have participated. Thank you very much.
Thank you for bringing us together, Prabhu. I know for a fact that your spiritual master, the founder Acharya of the International Society for Krishna Consciousness, His Divine Grace Srila A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Prabhupada is very pleased with you.
Very proud of you.
Right.
Jai Vanchakalpatarubhyas cha, Krivasantabhyeva cha, Patitanam Pavanebhyo Vaishnavebhyo Namo Namaha.
Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna. Thank you for coming on, Jivan Mukta Prabhu, Muchukunda. Jai,
Thank you
Haribol.
so much. Hare Krishna. Hare Krishna.